Welcome to Pasa, HSIs, a podcast dedicated to everything Hispanic serving institutions. I'm your host, Dr. Gina Ann Garcia, bringing you the news on what's happening in HSIs. Join us as we explore the history and evolution of HSIs, culturally relevant and liberatory practices, current and emerging research with HSIs, and the policies that shape servingness.
Saludos HSI familia, and welcome to Que Pasa HSIs. Today we are talking to Doctora Presidenta Cynthia Olivo. La Doctora has 28 years of experience in higher education and currently serves as president at Fullerton College. She has served as assistant superintendent, vice president, associate vice president, dean, director, coordinator, and counselor at multiple HSIs, including Pasadena City College and Cal State San Bernardino. In her nearly 3 decades as an educator, she has served as a champion for equity, inclusion, and academic excellence for students. Doctora Olivo's service extends beyond her own campus, previously serving as president of the Chief Student Services Officers Association, co-founder and president of the California Community College Organización de Latinx Guidance, Empowerment, and Advocacy for Success, known as Colegas, and as a founding member of The Coalition, an organization that includes African American Male Education Network and Development, known as A2Amend, and Asian Pacific Americans in Higher Education, known as APAHI. Doctora Olivo is a granddaughter of loving campesinos, daughter of an amazing single mom, and a proud Chicana mentored by other great Latina elders and ancestors who have paved the way for us Latinas in higher education. She graduated from CSUSB, San Bernardino that is, with a BA in psychology and an MS in counseling. And she also got her PhD in urban education at Claremont Graduate University. I'm super excited to be in community with the one and only Cynthia Olivo. Doctora Presidenta, thank you for joining us on Que Pasa HSIs, where we talk about all things HSIs. We're going to start by just hearing about your servingness journey. So start us there.
Gracias. It's so amazing to be here with you, Gina. It's an honor. And I thank you for the invitation. So I will say, my servingness journey began honestly when my mother was in our local community college, Mount San Jacinto, and she was in the EOP&S care program. And her counselor, Miss Winnie, she became this valuable person who helped our entire family. And so I remember my mom had this dream that I would go to college. And she said, Mija, if you want, more options and choices in life, you have to go to college. And I remember thinking, well, that sounds cool, but like we can barely keep the light on sometimes, So I just thought we couldn't afford it. And as much as we wanted it, it just was probably not going to happen. But Miss Winnie totally had answers for all of the questions that made us afraid about whether or not it was truly an option. So, I didn't have $55 for the admission application fee. And Miss Winnie was like, you just fill out this form and then they cover it. And then she said, by the way, find the lady that comes from Cal State San Bernardino, because that's where I wanted to attend. Find her when she comes to your high school. And I remember I signed up to see that person, and her name was Beatriz Magallon. And Beatriz helped me with everything. She helped me apply to the EOP program at Cal State San Bernardino. And I got in really through that program to the university. And so my servingness journey began with these amazing women. My mom, Miss Winnie, Beatriz, who's now this incredible counselor at Santa Monica College. And I was able to tell her thank you for helping me during that time when I was so filled with fear that I couldn't access college because of our finances, And as much as my mom wanted me to go, especially to change the trajectory of our family's lives, I just thought it was out of the question. And so these women made it possible. So for me, my servingness journey started with people who made the impossible possible with information and cariño. They offered it with so much love. They provided that open door with just so much genuine care to respond to my mom's requests, like help my daughter, and help our family. So that's me. That's what I want to do too.
Beautiful. I love that serving-ness journey and how it
Mhm.
came into your consciousness. It sounds
Mhm.
like Miss Winnie is what I call a server.
Yes.
It's like call us all servers, right? If we're really doing
Yes.
serving-ness, then we are servers, right? At the
Yeah.
HSIs. Did you attend HSIs, or like how did HSI come into your consciousness?
Yeah, I attended Cal State University, San Bernardino, and I went there for my bachelor's degree in psychology, and then also my master's degree in counseling and guidance. And I will say that I became aware about Hispanic Serving Institution when I was attending Cal State San Bernardino. And it was really in my final year there. I volunteered to work at a Chicano Latino youth leadership program called the Inland Empire Future Leaders Program. And I met Dr. Tom Rivera through that service. And then also Sal Castro. He was a keynote speaker at the program for Chicano Latino youth. And I just became conscious. I honestly, that's when I became a Chicana, was through this program. And then I learned about HSIs, and Dr. Tom Rivera, who kind of took me under his wing, he encouraged me to go to the Haku conference. And so I attended, and then I started learning about the national movement of Hispanic serving institutions, that the fact that we had to advocate for funding for our universities and colleges across the country, because the federal government wasn't just going to give us money just like that, without advocacy. And I also was encouraged by Dr. Rivera to pursue the Kika de la Garza fellowship program at the USDA. And, I was like, Cal State San Bernardino, we're not an ag school. Why would I sign up for that, Dr. Rivera? I don't want to apply for something that doesn't really help our college or our students. And then he just reminded me that Cal State San Bernardino was a large HSI. And we needed to learn about the opportunities available in the federal government to bring that information back to our students, to help them access the careers, the fellowships, the scholarships, and all the opportunities at the federal government level. So then, it just really became so clear to me that our job in higher ed is to become the people who get those resources and help our students access all of it and succeed. So yeah, I'm very proud that Cal State San Bernardino is my alma mater. I went to Claremont Graduate University for my PhD, but I will say it was there that I started seeing all of the data, especially from the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center, that shared about the Chicano educational pipeline. It was there that I really focused on what I could do to help contribute to improving student success at the community college level.
Thank you for bringing Dr. Rivera's name into the space, resting in
Yes.
power.
Yes.
But living as or not living, but definitely an elder, right, in this work, or an ancestor in the work, right? That so many people like draw on his mentoring and his leadership and his education. So thank you for that. I was also a USDA fellow and also didn't know what was going on when I went. I was like, I wasn't faculty at the time. I was a Title V implementer, and yeah, there's a lot of focus on getting grants, right? The faculty sort of focus on getting grants, but it was still pretty amazing to learn about some of the work that USDA was doing at the time. So lots of different spaces, HSI spaces that have been going on a long time. I'd say USDA is one of them.
Yes.
Let's talk about your approach to education. You are known for advancing equity and centering students in your work. So what does it mean to be an equity-minded and anti-racist leader, in your opinion?
Yeah, so for me, it really is, I am driven to achieve racial equity because I've seen the inequities occur for far too long. I will tell you, my own grandparents attended segregated Mexican schools, as elementary school children. And they were born in this country. My grandparents were born here, and my grandma went to a segregated Mexican school in Laverne, California. So I am from a family that experienced a systemic oppressive structure that was designed to hold us back intentionally, right? And then my mother attended schools where you couldn't speak Spanish in the schools. She knew, based upon how she was being treated compared to her friends, she was very aware that her fair skin was getting her access to some classes that her friends were not. So my mother raised me to have this racialized lens to understand when racism was occurring, and honestly, when it's happening on a systemic level and an individual level. And my mom is so brave, she calls it out in the moment. So I will say for myself, that's why I'm driven to make sure we are intentionally creating, designing, implementing these educational environments that our students deserve. Humanizing environments, right? Loving colleges where our students feel supported. They know they belong. They can succeed without question, right? That intentionality, that they feel it. It's something palpable. And I feel like I'm talented and I can do that. I can provide that kind of leadership to bring a college community, to bring that out in them.
To create spaces where nobody ever has to experience that again.
Exactly. Yes, we have to do that. And it's something that I think every college is capable of. It's just the leadership has to help focus the energy in that direction.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So what do you think about equity working in conjunction with HSI? Because I talk about that a lot, right?
Yeah.
That I'm like, HSI is equity work. So if you're committed to equity, you can easily be committed to HSI. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I would say, for myself, going back to that data that I saw from the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center, it just was so clear. And the way that information was shared across the state, it really helped a lot of us pause and ask the question, what are we all doing? How are we allowing, this data to continue without interrupting it? And I'm not sure if you recall, but it's this infographic that shows for every 100 Latino kindergartners, right, how many will graduate high school. So it's like 46. Of the 46, 26 will go to community college. Of those 26, like 1 will transfer, right? And then it gets down to the end point, 2 will get a doctorate. And so it was for myself, what happens that only 1 transfers, right, from community college to a 4-year? And I think for Latino students, there's a few things that are true. I feel like the work from Dr. Angela Valenzuela in subtractive schooling is true, right? We are asking our students, our Latinx, Latino and Latina students, to subtract who they are in order to make it. And that sacrifice sometimes is just too much. We cannot splinter ourselves to become what a predominantly white institution asks of us, right? Our cultura centers familia. It centers cooperation, collaboration. And our colleges sometimes have these very rigid environments that, it's just too much. It asks us to just abandon who we are, let go of our familia, and I feel like that is sometimes true in our colleges, that we have to change that. So there's that. I feel like to be a great HSI, you have to really love the students that you have in your college, and you have to become who they are. And that requires change, and change is really hard. Colleges are wired like to be, you know, driven towards accreditation outcomes. Sometimes accreditation outcomes, like, they steer you away from being who the students need you to be. So it's leadership that requires us to like weave in between both, right? So you're creating this trenza, right? This braid of, you know, we can be student friendly, student centered, who the students need us to be, as well as achieving outcomes, documenting, doing program review. We can do all of that. We must. Mhm.
Oh, I love the analogy. Exactly. We can, and you braid it all in together.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people want to just like you know, you don't have to throw out what you've done. You can do some good thing. We're all good at some stuff.
Yes.
All colleges are good at stuff, and universities. We're just asking to do better by our students. And that's
Yes,
exactly the
absolutely.
narrative you're pushing for, right? Is like,
Yeah.
just do better.
Yeah.
Allow students to bring in their culture, their ways of being, their
Yes.
treasures. How we say their treasures. Bring the treasures in. Don't leave it at the
Oh my
door.
gosh, that's so true. Yes, I mean, honestly, the work that I was able to lead and be a part of, right? Because that's leadership in my perspective, is leading from the front and then also being a part of the community. You know, once you activate the leadership on your campus to contribute, the work that we utilized at Pasadena City College when I was there ultimately was, you know, community cultural wealth theory by Terioso.
Mm-hmm.
And just building that in so that we can help students and ourselves, what you said, recognize the treasure they bring with them, the assets they're bringing with them,
Mm-hmm.
and then building on that. It's really powerful once you do it as a college. And then it helps shift everything. It shifts the conversation, it shifts events, it shifts the classroom. Yeah, it's really amazing.
Absolutely. Ooh, yes. That's what we got to do. We have to acknowledge that and stop talking about our students as deficit, right? We all often blame the student. Well, this is wrong with them and that is wrong with them. And English is their second language. No, they have two languages. How about that? Right? It's just little tweaking, and it's something so much more powerful to say they can speak two languages and think in two languages. Like that's pretty advanced.
Absolutely.
And that we know that from actually research, right? Research shows us that.
Yes.
And so we just got to convince folks.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that change is hard, and I agree. It's basically the topic I study is organizational change, and been studying it for over 10 years and not seeing a lot of change. But I'm trying, as you know. One day I'll retire and I'll be like, I see a little bit. A little has changed. But that brings me to my next question, which I read this article about when you were at PCC, you mentioned at Pasadena City College. This idea of equity, addressing equity gaps through little tweaks, and I'll drop it in the show notes so people can read it. It's a Politico article. So talk to us about some of that, about this idea of just minor tweaks leading to a larger organizational change.
Yeah. You know, it was through the work that I was reading from Dr. Estela Ben-Simon at the time. And I brought her in to PCC to work with her and our college to really focus our equity efforts, because at that particular time, it was when the state gave everyone funding. Every community college received funding, and we didn't know we were going to get it. So it was like an amazing surprise, pero también we weren't ready, you know? So I was like, who can we partner with to help us be ready? And who better than Estela Ben-Simon at the time at the Center for Urban Education. So I started to read some of her work to be more familiar with what she was, you know, teaching. And she said, it's really a change in our policies, practices, habits, and routines that lead to more equitable outcomes. And that if we wanted to truly achieve racial equity, it has to be from the practices we have in place in our colleges, right? It's the practitioner and institutional responsibility to change. It is not that students need to change. So again, abandoning that deficit mindset that, you know, historically has permeated all of higher education. So I really did help change a culture of Pasadena City College through this process of engaging people in these tweaks that led to more equitable outcomes and an equitable mindset for the entire institution, right? So that we understood we are an HSI and had been since 1983, the inception practically of the HSI status, you know, and it helped the entire college, honestly, to understand our student body, our student population. I remember when I first got there, people told me, you know, before you continued mentioning undocumented students, just be aware it's not a topic that's really discussed on our campus. It's kind of taboo. And I was like, coming from Cal State San Bernardino, where I talked about it openly, freely, and led the workshops for the entire Cal State system to discuss how to help undocumented students. So it was an adjustment for myself, but also this recognition that there was a lot of work that needed to be done there. And like Dr. Rivera taught me, you'd never be an island unto yourself. You must engage with people to get the work done. So those people at PCC that led those tweaks and practices honestly became this large group of leadership community that helped to shift the culture of the campus and the outcomes of the college so that we were more race conscious and that our outcomes reflected our student body, which is predominantly Latinx. For a college, 30,000 students at the time, you know, to be over 50% Latino, Latina, and Latinx, it was incredible. It's what we needed to do.
Poco a poco.
Yes.
A little bit at a time, right?
Yes.
That's a great theory to think about long-term organizational change. And I don't think people do that. I think I was actually meeting with a group earlier this week and they were like, we're moving very fast on this HSI thing. What do you think about that? And I'm like, nobody does it fast, right? Like,
yeah,
it's slow. Equity work is slow. HSI work is slow. Transformation is slow. You know, change is slow. We have to sort of acknowledge that and then celebrate those small wins. It makes it easier to like be like, oh, but we did this one thing and it's really good.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember one thing I did at PCC that was kind of fast, but maybe it was in a 3-year period. So I kept seeing we're inching closer and closer to 51% of the student body. And so I just kept checking, when did we get to that point? Because when we got to that point, I wanted to celebrate it intentionally, you know, in some big way for the entire college. And so I remember one census day, then one of the researchers called me and they were like, we're at 51%. I was like, excellent. Okay. So we had a huge party in the center of the campus in the quad. I brought in one of the professors from USC, Dr. Manuel Pastor. One of his areas of research is demographics and the rapid shift of demographics, Latinos in cities, and you know what it means to the state of California. And then you know, it was just like a huge party, and I loved seeing the student newspaper cover that. Their journalism was so beautiful. It talked about this minority milestone for the college. That was the title of the article. And to me, it just showed that all students, because the person who wrote the article was white. And they were like, we loved this event because it just brought us all together to celebrate this amazing milestone that our college achieved. and to demonstrate that this college is majority Latino and there's something here for all of us. It helped us all come together and it felt like a family out on the quad, doing Aztec dancing together and, celebrating with food and this amazing lecture from this professor at USC that came in to visit. It was just awesome. It was a great way to acknowledge and then make everyone feel welcome at PCC. Mhm.
I feel like celebrations is a part of your leadership style.
Yes.
From what I know of you, you like to celebrate, right?
Yes.
But that is beautiful and amazing because
Yes.
it's what an important milestone. And then to bring it
Yes.
to light of the campus.
Yeah.
I mean, when you were talking, I was even thinking about, we think about accountability in this higher ed way, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever accountability, like the state keeps us accountable and feds keep us accountable, yet
Yeah.
that's accountability to your students.
It is.
Right, acknowledging that this milestone happened, acknowledging that we acknowledge y'all as living beings here,
Yes.
and we're going to celebrate that. That's
Yes.
I think a level of accountability.
It is. Yeah.
So I love that. You also co-authored an article about making transfer easier as a means to achieve racial equity. So transfer obviously is a huge conversation for community colleges, often a forefront, right? Conversation at the forefront. So what did y'all write about? Tell us about that idea of transfer being a means to racial equity.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that article up because I co-authored it with Scott Thayer, and Dr. Thayer is the new president at Cypress College, which is in my district. And I will tell you that, we worked together like 8 years ago, for 7 years. And I never would have thought that both of us would be presidents in the same district at neighboring colleges, still continuing our journey towards racial equity and just having that great camaraderie between us to have the support to do that, right? Because it is hard work. I will say that when we wrote the article, the importance of policy really was starting to make a lot of sense to me. And as somebody who came up as a grassroots activist leader, turned scholar, turned administrator, right? This blend of all three. Policy to me is something that I really learned about, like no matter who's in the seat, right? Like personality-based leadership, sure, that's important because you got to be our authentic self. But what if that leader is no longer in the seat, right? That person is gone. But what is going to drive behavior and practice is policy. So in that particular article, we were advocating for, I believe it was AB 928. And while it wasn't a popular policy, sometimes we have to advocate for the unpopular practice to come through because our students need it. And it's going to require us to make changes that are very uncomfortable and inconvenient in our already busy schedules. But let's face it, the 1440 law, it's done what it could to help make transfer easier. Now we need another major reform effort to help open that door even wider for our students to transfer from the 2-year system to the 4-year system. It's just, that's what it's going to take. So you'll notice that when I wrote the article, I was referenced as the president of Colegas. So, for everyone out there that's listening to this, just make sure you always understand, like, you have to utilize your navigational capital and understand how to put your voice with something, add your name to something, amplify a message, while also looking out for, is your institution okay with you doing this? So I wasn't representing PCC at the time where I was employed. I was representing Colegas, and Scott was representing Amend. And, that was part of the way we were able to support that effort.
policy is the way, huh?
Yes, yes.
Imagine that. What an idea. Policy. I have my students write about policy and how it hurts people rather than who it's helping. Like, who is policy hurting? Because we know policy hurts a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we need to come up with policies that help more,
Yeah.
right? Rather
Honestly,
than
when I was doing that Kika de la Garza fellowship in
Mhm.
DC, I remember visiting politicians, and then I heard from, it was probably one of the families that's been on the Hill for a very long time. One of them, she was advocating for basically the Dream Act. This is like in the year 2000. And I remember when I heard about the Dream Act back then, I was like, whoa, there's politicians trying to push policy forward that'll help. Up until that point, I had not heard of that either. You know, it was always policy that hurts us, that targets us. But no, policy can help. You know, it's just we have to figure out what policy is needed and when, and then push it through.
Yes, absolutely. So that leads me to my next question, because I was reviewing your Fullerton College president's page, and you had some really cool goals, and I wanted to ask you about all of them, but we don't have enough time. But goal 1 says that Fullerton College will use an inclusive and race-conscious approach to address persistent equity gaps. So talk to us about how you do that as a president. Assuming it's policy, but I don't know. So I'm gonna let you go with that one.
Yes. For me, I needed to be my authentic self when I was interviewing, and also putting my materials together so that any district that hired me, right, any board of trustees that approved my hiring would know exactly who they're getting. So I will say this district has been very welcoming of myself as a leader and somebody who really does center racial equity in everything that I do. And so my team here understands that's what I'm about. And that when we look at data, I will always ask for the data disaggregated by race and ethnicity. I'm always going to push for us to be real with ourselves about what we have to focus on. So for example, we just had spring convocation last Friday, and I said, our data tells us, and I wasn't there to review charts and charts of data. I said that we have other time to do that. I am here to tell you our practices do not align with 2 groups of students, Black and Latinx students. So we need to change our practices. So I had 7 calls to action, and my ask of my college was that every person on campus, no matter what role they're in, that they do one of the 7. So everyone's changing. So Dr. Garcia, you helped me reflect on, I'm continuing that process that I did at PCC where it's tweaks. And I've been here a year, and I was ready to roll out, like, here's the 7, pick one menu item and do it. And then I also, I'm doing something new también. I invited everyone to sign up. I'm doing a once a week breakfast at Revolucion Cafe down the street. So I feel like that's what we're after here. We want to revolutionize our campuses to be more in line with who our students need us to be. And I want to hear the voices of my faculty and staff and listen to any ideas and observations they have. So what better place to do it than off campus, over breakfast, breaking bread, building community. And Revolucion Cafe has a great chilaquiles or breakfast burrito with coffee. So vámonos. That's what we're going to do this semester.
With a sprinkle of equity.
Yes.
In the conversation.
Yes.
Revolutionize our campus. I love that.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
elevate that, because that aligns with my ideas around HSI as a movement. Right?
Yes.
We have to be radical. We have to think differently. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. It's going to be the same results.
Absolutely.
We're going to see the exact same inequities over and over and over again.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I was so happy, in the fall, I started my convocation in the fall was Regina Stanback Stroud. And then that was August, and September was my investiture, where I brought you in, and then also La Mera Mera, Dolores Huerta, and I really just was able to celebrate being a woman leader, being a Chicana leader, and really helping the campus get to know me. And then also just celebrating this new beginning here at Fullerton College. So now I'm just happy to then continue that progress so that we can utilize the grant we achieved with you so that we can work on being a better HSI. And I'm just so hopeful with my HSI transformation team. I know that we're going to do some really extraordinary work together.
Yes, I love that project. We're working on transformation.
Yep.
Slow tweaks.
Yes.
It's taking time, but we are doing it. We're gonna keep doing it.
Yes.
So I think one thing I want us to talk about is something anybody that comes to the pod that works at a 2-year HSI, I ask this question because I'm constantly as a scholar trying to think what is unique about the community colleges as HSIs versus 4-year. What should be unique? What should we be elevating as like, this is HSI at a 2-year and it's not at a 4-year. This is very, distinct. And I have a lot more ideas the more I get to the honor of working with so many of the community colleges in California. I getting a lot of ideas, but what are your thoughts on what makes a 2-year HSI unique?
Yeah, having worked at a 2-year and a 4-year HSI, I will tell you, I feel like at the 2-year, there's more of an opportunity to be a part of the students' lives and to know their stories and to be a part of their story, really. Especially for my students that transfer on. What I hear from them is when they get to the 4-year, they're so overwhelmed with trying to fit in, get to know their professors, and then finish. Because if they get there and they only have 2 years left, it's kind of goes really fast. But here at the community college, we really get to know them, hear what they're facing, understand their situation, build on their assets, and help them like lift off. So I think that's the difference. I know at Cal State San Bernardino, when I was there initially, over time, I got to know profesoras and people that helped me, but it did take time. We're at community college, we try and like affiliate a students to some categorical program that we have. In some way, we're really trying to connect. So that way we get to know the students and we can help the students in a personalized way. One of my favorite analogies that I heard from a student at PCC, and I keep referencing that because I spent almost 15 years there and I, have stories to tell from there. But a student, I remember he said he attended PCC a long time ago. And then he went to like one of the LA schools because it was closer to his house. He thought going to PCC was worth the commute, but then he was like, I'll just go closer to my house. Then he saw in the paper we were having an exhibit to honor Jaime Escalante, an alum of PCC. And I led that. So he came to the exhibit. He saw this beautiful story of Jaime Escalante, who was an immigrant and had to start from scratch. Like he was a busboy across the street from the college. Then the president who frequented that restaurant for lunch convinced him to come to the college to take ESL classes. Then he took math, and then the whole story of Jaime Escalante unfolded, right? And the students saw like, whoa, he was an engineer. He loved math. You could be an engineer if you love math. So the student had initially come to PCC for like one of the career technical programs, but then realized I really want to pursue engineering. So he re-enrolled at PCC, and he said before PCC felt like a cold bank. Like if you walk in and you just get in line, you get to the front, there's the window, and very transactional. But when he returned, he said it felt different. It felt like he was at a family party, and everywhere he went, a tío, a tía, a cousin was saying like, how are you? How's it going? Like rooting him on, cheering for him, helping him. He felt a shift in the college. And to me, that was intentional. That was by design. We worked on that environment to make it feel warm, welcoming, inclusive, inviting. And most importantly, to help the students really feel like they could achieve the goals that they set for themselves, like pursuing engineering instead of construction, which he originally had done, So I feel like that's the difference between a 2-year and a 4-year. Yeah.
Ooh, what I love about this is that you talk about the experience and the feeling of HSI versus like the outcomes, right? Like, because that's what I initially thought was the difference of 2 years, right? I'm like, well, they do transfer and they do certificates and they do CTE and they do dual enrollment, right? All these things that are like very structurally what we do. And you went with, but this is how it feels, right? To be at an HSI, which is anybody that listens knows I'm always going to pull in theory with the HSI typology of HSI organizational identities. Those are the two dimensions. Outcomes, yes, we need equitable outcomes, but we need an equitable, liberatory, joyful, culturally relevant, linguistically relevant, familia relevant space.
Yes.
And that's where you went, right? You went with that direction of like, how does it feel? And I say that also, how does it feel? Does it feel like an HSI?
Yes.
And that was what you went with. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because it's always constantly, I'm always growing. That's why I love the podcast. I'm always growing, right? In these episodes of like, that's a good way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about coalition building.
So
originally when I invited you, I was like, okay, I know what I want her to talk about. I want her to talk about coalition building because I see and I know some of the work you're doing across groups, right? And when I say coalition building, I mean across racial groups, right? Racial ethnic groups that we don't need to fight, that there's more seats, we can pull more seats up to the table, we can cut more pieces of the pie, we can we can cook a new pie, bake a new pie, bake a new pizza. We don't have to fight over crumbs. And I see you as a leader that does that. It really honors the coalition building. So I want to hear your take on like where does that come from? Why do you think it's so important to build coalitions across racial ethnic groups in this work?
Yeah. It just goes deep and far back to, well, honestly, when I was back at Cal State San Bernardino, I met people who were also working towards liberation for themselves and for their community. And what was there, I learned that what has happened in our country, unfortunately, it's this shared experiences of being othered. And, it's systemic. It's been by design that our communities have been pushed to the margins. And so I met people at Cal State San Bernardino who were activists and intentionally worked towards liberation. I was so blessed to meet these individuals, and we affirmed each other in our efforts and recognized that in working towards liberation, we couldn't be in isolation, that our collectivism was so valuable and necessary because we could draw energy from one another. And it's just continued to manifest in my life, in my professional life, and also personally, to have friendships across racial lines and to have loving relationships across racial lines, And then in my professional life, it just so happened that I think around 6 years ago, when a group of us got together to form colegas, one of my colleagues who happened to be from Cal State San Bernardino back in the day back in the day. He was like, well, we were waiting for you all to be organized. Now that you are, do you want to get together and we could create a coalition? And I said, yes, absolutely. And, talked to colegas and said, I think we need to be together with our other two organizations that represent our Asian Pacific Americans in higher education and then our African American male education network and development. And let's see what we can do together. And it was just perfect timing because, the politics in our nation back then were very divisive, and they were reminiscent to me of the era that I came up in as an undergrad when I first became a Chicana and an activist. In California, we were facing Prop 187, Prop 209, Prop 227. So it was like these back-to-back, very intentionally oppressive laws that were targeting our communities of color, So for us to come together during this era was so important because it demonstrated that we are united. And that is one of our statements: unity is our superpower. We're going to be together. And when the system thinks, oh, let's throw them some scraps and then we're all going to fight over those scraps, they got another thing coming. We are not fighting each other. We're uniting our efforts, and we're going to fight that system, and we're going to build a new structure and build new ways of being in our colleges so that we can be what our students need us to be. And that's what we're doing. We created the Aspiring Radical Leadership Institute. We have one cohort that's gone through. It's around 30 people across the state. And this weekend, as a matter of fact, I'm just coming from our coalition retreat. We had our second cohort come through. There's 25 individuals from all throughout the state. We learned from our first cohort to pick a smaller number so it's more manageable for us. Especially because all of us, we're all in different colleges with our full jobs of administrators, faculty members, etc. So we have 25 participants this time around. And it's just so powerful to be in spaces with people who are also seeking liberation and how to do our work in ways that are considered more radical. And there's just, like more intentionality towards liberatory outcomes, like you've shown us and you've written about, Gina.
Yes. So this group you're talking about is called The Coalition.
The Coalition. And you can follow us. It's CC Coalition on Instagram, LinkedIn. We have a website, California Community College Coalition. We just hired a new executive director. Her name is Rowena Ramos. Our logistics coordinator is Bradley Johnson. And we have tri-chairs. That's our model. So the tri-chairs represent the three organizations that make up the coalition. And so we meet on Saturday mornings on Zoom. This particular Saturday, we met in person. The next time we'll all get together is at the Amend conference, then at the APAHI conference. So Amend's in March, APAHI is in April. And then our second gathering of our cohort for Aspiring Radical Leadership Institute will be here at Fullerton College in April. And then the board will come together again so we can review our progress in realizing the goals of our grant that we received from the Chancellor's Office to host ARLI. I mean, just think about it though. We have like 30 people who went through our first cohort, 25 going through our second. That's 55 leaders across our systems that are bringing in new practices to realize racial equity and to center liberation in our outcomes. So it's powerful.
Absolutely. So this is for community colleges all across the nation, or just California community colleges?
Just California community colleges so far. Although when we started out, we did say we are going to become The organization that the country is looking for when you're talking about what leadership is required, what leadership do we need to teach people to have in order to truly lead our colleges towards racial equity. And so we have an advisory board. This is like our second time now doing our cohort program. So we're going to just keep getting better and better each time. Mhm.
And so you do this all on top of your job as a president?
Yeah, so for me, this is why we have tri-chairs. So our tri-chair rep from Colegas is Dr. Guadalupe Corona. She's a director of student equity at Southwestern Community College. And then the tri-chair rep from Amend, his name is Dr. Herb English. He is the vice president of student services at Riverside City College. The tri-chair for Apahi is Dr. Abe Ali, and he's like vice chancellor of human resources for the Kern Community College District. So one of the things that we say is get in where you fit in. So if you're not leading a tri-chair, if you're not in a tri-chair role or executive director or logistics coordinator, you contribute where it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
So as a president now, I'm not leading it. I'm contributing where I can. When I was a vice president and we first got started 2 years ago with our cohort, I led some of the curriculum. I was on the curriculum committee. Mm-hmm. And I led the actual in-person convenings to make sure everything was in place for our curriculum, for the experience of the participants. And part of what I bring to the table in that regard is really honoring our indigenous roots, all of us in all three communities,
Mm-hmm.
bringing in ceremonia, like ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
and truly just being in that place of peace, right? Because in order to build on the talents we all bring to the table, we have to create that space where we're unlearning so we can emerge as ourselves, really, our authentic being. And we are unlearning whiteness and what whiteness has called for us to be and to focus on as leaders. And Arlie is about unlearning those things so that you can really focus on what do the students need? How do you become that leader that really just is there to bring about more authentic ways of leading that are in alignment with who our students are, who our communities are, what our communities need, and that you're courageous enough and brave enough to be that, on a campus where maybe they're not there yet, but then you are, and then you're surrounded by your colleagues in Arlie who are also doing the same thing. It is so powerful. Yeah.
Absolutely powerful. Everything you said is like so important to think about. Going back to the question, right, about coalition building.
Yes.
And I do want to acknowledge that the tri-chair model actually is like, I've never heard of that. I've never even heard that term, but it's important that the voices are equally distributed. I mean, they're equally, right? But they're all from the three groups are there, right? Which represent these three racial ethnic groups, right? Versus having one chair that probably only one group's person would get elevated to the chair, which I assume is why y'all did that, but we don't see that always, even when groups do come together. Like I think about student groups coming together. I've been in that space when I was a student group, right? When we come together with other organizations because we know more and more powerful. But there's always one leader and not multiple leaders from each group. So I wanted to make sure we put an exclamation point on that for people who are really thinking, what does coalition building look like on my campus?
Yes.
Especially because a lot of campuses are implementing the faculty staff associations, right? The affinity groups, that's becoming so popular. But are you in coalition with the other affinity groups? Or are you just to yourself, making sure you're okay, which is important, but also building that coalition across. So lots to think about as we think about how we do this work in community. So thank you.
Yep.
I think one of the other things I wanted to talk about was you know, it's very obvious that you bring your identity into your leadership, right? You're a proud Chicana and granddaughter of migrant farm workers. And you mentioned the importance of ceremony, right? That you brought that in with your group. And I got to witness that at your investiture. I don't know if you remember, because you were probably just as overwhelmed as me, but I had to pause when I went up, because I was like, this is really powerful to bring all this, you know, just beauty into the space and recognizing, and you did build coalition there. I was like, okay, she's bringing in every group.
Yeah.
Right. We had different groups bring in their ceremonial ways of welcoming you as their president and blessing you as their president. It was just so powerful. So I just want to put that, anybody that missed that, you missed like a good event. Although I'm still mad at you that you made me go after La Mera Mera. I was like, how am I gonna follow the
you know why I did it that way? Because to me, you are the futuro, you know? You're the now and the futuro. And Dolores Huerta brings so much history. Like, she's a living legend, right? We all cherish her in the present, of course. When I think about the future of our movimiento, I think about you. You know, you've advanced our work as activist, scholar, educators so much through your work and your leadership. So that's why I put you after, because I wanted people to know, you know, that like it continues.
Yes. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm not mad at you no more. I was like, why should make me go after Dolores Huerta? That's not cool. But it was a really emotional time, right? Even having her and presentation to her and stuff. Like, it was just the honoring of her was, it was very powerful. So anyways, what the question was, I did have a question. We went on a tangent. But I wanted to talk about one of the most recent topics right now is this idea of around Claudine Gay's resignation from Harvard. And that brought up very emotional responses, particularly from Black women and particularly from women of color. And I immediately was thinking about people like you, people who are my friends, my amigas who are leading our community colleges and other colleges and universities, but in particular, you know, some of the great leaders that I know are in the California community college system. And I worried about y'all. I think we exchanged some words about it, right? Even on Instagram, I was like, are you okay? Right? Like, I'm worried about that when you do show up as your true authentic self, it can turn out not good, right? In this particular case. So what political tensions do you and other women of color presidents, particularly in the California community college system, since that's the context we're talking about, have to be cautious of as you're doing this work?
Yeah, you know, it is a reality you need to face. And I would say that's part of the reason why it's not an option for me of whether I'm going to be involved in organizations like the coalition and like colegas, right? It's a part of that whole lesson I learned through Dr. Rivera of never be an island unto yourself. So that's one way to navigate, is you have to surround yourself with people who you can connect with as you are experiencing situations that test who you are as a person. And that way you're not alone. You're able to process with people who are in the system who also understand. And that is a strength that you can find, right? If you are connecting with your peers in other colleges. So that helps. I will say part of me understands, you know, this whole idea of being in these roles, especially as women of color. And I want to emphasize that it really is the women of color. We get into these roles where sometimes it's like walking a tightrope, where you're drawn into this, like, you need to be perfect at all times. You have to say and do the right thing. And to me, that neglects seeing us as fully human people, right? We are human beings and human beings are not perfect. So I am constantly pushing against that. I think even at my investiture, you heard our student trustee share in her words to the audience, right? That she's appreciated about me, that I tell her it's okay to just be you, be your authentic self. And if people take offense to you and who you show up as, like, honestly, don't take it personal. That's more about them than you. And she referenced that I gave her a copy of the book, The Four Agreements. I mean, that's what I utilized as my first leadership retreat with my management team here. Like all the deans, all the directors, my vice presidents, I had facilitators who utilized that book to teach, because I wanted to make sure these four agreements were the foundation and basis of how I'm going to work with people here, so that it's okay to just be me and be my imperfect self, because I am a human being, right? To be fully human. I will say something, because I always appreciate when leaders give, like, can you just give me a couple of nuggets of like what I can do? So where you work and who you work with is important. I came here and I was fortunate that there's leaders like my chancellor, Dr. Byron Breland. I've seen his work. He has done really credible, equity-centered work in other colleges. And so that helps me to work with people who I can see they're about it. He hired Rowena Tomenang, and also, Tamil Gilkerson. These are two women who are also racial equity champions. So for me to work with someone who I know is also going to make it okay, right? Create this environment where we can focus on racial equity, it becomes the norm, that helps. So I would say, before you look at a position, look to see who you're going to work with, and look for indicators and cues that tell you, like, hey, there is a desire. This community does want to work towards racial equity. They want it. It's not here yet, but they want it. And I've seen indicators of that where I'm at now at Fullerton College. I can see the college wants it. There's a core group here that really is about it. And so then that makes me so happy as a person, because I'm like, this is a great match. Yay, I landed in a good place and I can be me, and they're accepting of it. And, we're going to just do some amazing work together for our students and each other. So I would say those are my little nuggets of takeaways to folks. Look who you're going to work for, look for indicators that the community really wants it. And just make the space and the environment where you can be your full human being self, who's imperfect, and they're going to love you no matter what. And then for Claudine Gay, I think Harvard, it's just, unfortunately, it's a PWI. As much as, what is their motto? Seek truth always. They're trying, but it's falling short because of that PWI identity at its core. So if they were just a better like HSI, they would be more real.
We got 400 years of undoing Harvard. I don't even know where to start.
Right?
Yeah, oh man, I teach the history of higher ed. That's where we start.
Yeah.
So everything that's wrong with higher ed is actually Harvard. Right?
Yeah.
What a representation. And this was just an example of that. It's like,
yeah,
you couldn't even handle having this amazing, brilliant scholar lead your campus.
Yeah, for a lot of us, like, I'm not going to say we're cynical, in the coalition. I will tell you, like, January 6th, the insurrection, many of us, I remember, we're on our respective campuses watching it go down, and we're texting each other like, do you see this? So to us, I would say almost nothing surprises us anymore. And seeing this amazing leader like Claudine Gay, not last a year at Harvard, we're not surprised. And we know she will be fine and land on her feet and move forward, and the universe will make sure she is okay and more than okay, and many of us are just like, this is the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We know that it's there. It's not easy to do, and especially at a PWI like Harvard.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for giving us some hope, though.
Yes.
And I think your thoughts about like finding the place that allows you to be is so important, because I meet a lot of people, as you know, I visit lots of spaces, lots of places, lots of colleges, and I do meet people who are not happy and they feel like they can't be their full selves, right? And it's
Yeah.
easy to say, oh, we'll get a new job, but that is part of the process, right? Of like when you're deciding where you want to work, is like you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. You get to decide if you want to be here.
That's why we also have colegas in the fall, and then a mend in the spring, and a pahi in the spring. So at least there's like opportunities for you to come together with your community and with people who are also working towards the same goal. So I would say that's my other nugget, is make sure you participate in professional development, like our conferences, right? That give you these moments to just breathe and be yourself and celebrate. And yeah, it helps. And then the coalition, right? Arlie, we're also working on, that's one of our next projects for the next group, is to work on some kind of experience with the coalition so that we can provide some outlet also for people in the system that want to join us. Yeah, because we realize it can be very isolating work. Extremely isolating, and none of us could ever just do this by ourselves. We have to always be in community with other people who are working towards the same goals.
Absolutely. You're making me want to text all my peoples and be like, thank you for being my people. Thank you for holding me up all these years, because we cannot do what we do in colleges and universities that are not for us without our people.
Yes, absolutely.
We need to support each other. We need to be there for each other. So
yeah,
thank you for bringing us so much hope in this episode. Unfortunately, we got to wrap it up, because we gotta finish at some point. But
yeah,
you gotta
it's
answer.
been so awesome to talk with you.
Oh, thank you. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah.
But of course, you can't get out of the pod unless you answer the final question, which is, the name of the podcast is ¿Qué pasa HSIs? So, Doctora Cynthia Olivo, ¿Qué pasa HSIs?
Well, ¿qué pasa HSIs? Continue doing your amazing leadership work. Make sure that our colleges are who our students need us to be. And as long as we do that, we'll be doing our jobs right. So muchas gracias. I really appreciate it. And keep on keeping on, people.
Órale. Thank you.
Gracias.